Welcome to Afterthoughts. Join us and hear our thoughts after watching a movie that I'm very interested to hear when both of you turned it off. I am your host tonight, Ryan King, and with me, as always, John Garcia.
Hey, Ryan, I'm really excited to talk about Simple Jerk. Steve Martin's proving role. It just really swinging for the fences.
Absolutely. Yes, and also joining us, Michael Dixon.
Ryan, you're the real jerk for picking this movie, making me watch this pile of shit.
You know, we needed every so often. We've been too many good movies, in a row. Even on our recommend and refutes, it's been good movies. John had a one or two in there and a recommend or review that was questionable, but we had to bring this back around and ground it around a questionable late 70s, early chaos comedy kind of movie. Yes, we were talking about 1979's The Jerk, starring Steve Martin.
In the history of motion pictures, only a select few performers have become immortalized by the roles they have portrayed. Consider the Vamp, the Champ, the Tramp, and now the most perfect casting of all, Steve Martin, the Jerk.
It was never easy for me. I was born a poor black child.
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin with this.
I don't either.
I would say, yeah, we could kind of go around and give our gist, but I would like to wonder what point, because John, you texted me or you messaged
Dixon,
in the chat.
It was me.
Dixon messaged you. What the
Dixon,
fuck is this?
Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to hear what scene that was at, but I'll kick off with my opinions and generally why I picked this movie. This is a movie I watched a lot when I was younger. And certain lines have stuck in my head. And I think even as questionable as this movie is, some of the lines and scenes can still stick with you. I kind of wanted to revisit it just because this is Steve Martin's first movie. This is before Airplane, I think a year before Airplane.
Mm-hmm.
And Carl Reiner's second movie, more or less. Carl Reiner obviously doing a lot of television for a long time before. And kind of a zany-ish comedian himself. This is one of those first zany movies, that's funny and just for stupid reasons with a stupid main character. That we wouldn't have the modern, Dumb and Dumber or anything else. This is kind of the progenitor of all of those. So it'll be interesting to go back and look at it. I also wanted to see how it held up. Definitely some questionable content. I think in the concept, it is a good laugh and played for laughs, but there's definitely a scene later where it's used that I think people would not be happy with today. That being how Steve Martin grew up a young black boy, a young poor black boy. I still find it funny. Part of it, I think, is the nostalgia of all the stupid lines and stupid stuff. I do think Steve Martin kind of after this solidifies into a better set of roles before just becoming the old man in movies. There's kind of a short window between the kind of chaos that was SNL, which I know he wasn't on the cast, but he was a very common recurring host, but kind of the chaos of his stand-up in SNL, these couple of crazy movies, and then he gets into some actually funny shit. And this is definitely in that, we're just throwing stuff at the wall. He and Carl Reiner thought this was funny and just did the things they thought were funny, and they didn't really care if anyone got it or gave a shit. The interesting thing is that this is the 8th highest grossing movie of 1979.
Wow.
And the fact that is a year that includes Apocalypse Now, for good movies, Apocalypse Now, but it also includes Alien and Star Trek The Motion Picture. So the fact that this is on a budget of nothing compared to those two movies and was just behind them and how much money it made is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I think maybe is more of a testament to just how popular Steve Martin was than necessarily this was a movie that everyone was like, oh, you gotta go watch it. It's amazing. But we'll go around. I want to see your thoughts on the actual movie, but John, I'll jump to you.
Yeah. I've only ever known Steve Martin since he's been diagnosed with chronically unfunny syndrome. And I think that's right around when Cheaper by the Dozen came out.
The Pink Panther
it was
remakes,
the Pink Panther
those
remakes.
were so bad.
It was I think really what put the nail in his coffin before he's even in it was Fantasia 2000. When they paid a bunch of celebrities to come up and do a gag or two in between musical interludes. And there's the same amount of silence on film that there is in the audience for any of Steve Martin's jokes at that moment, which is to say a lot. And there's an orchestra behind him too. There should be noise on the camera, but I had not seen him do anything like this. I've only seen him play it safe, and I've only seen him brought into like the things where he can collect a check and leave. And I was also high for half of this movie. Like I was slowly ramping up.
That's probably for the best.
So the first half, I was just like, the fuck's going on? I don't really know how I should feel about it. And then the latter half, I laughed my ass off and had a good time. And
just on the ride.
Yeah, I was just like on a ride. I was like, all right, fine, fuck it. Like I'm here for it. It conjured a lot of images in my head of like other comedies that I can see pulling from it. Even sketches too. Like I know there's a Chappelle Show sketch where Dave plays a black man who was raised white, but he's blind, so he doesn't know.
Oh,
and he
yeah,
joins like
yeah.
the KKK and all that shit, which seems like the inverse here. And then the kind of like rags to riches story that you see in like Walk Hard. With this, they had a very similar thing with like the wedding sequence and him approaching a girl and being like, I don't know, Dewey Cox being double married and some other shit, to the jerk being in a relationship that he doesn't want to be in and trying to like move out of it by not closing the actual relationship he was previously in. Like shit like that had me laughing, and it was just awkward and funny. And there were some really good bits I felt in the latter half of it, but the first half really, it had to do a lot to set up and make me laugh. And I was just like, I don't know how long I'm going to go before I realize that Steve Martin's just never been funny. But then he actually did. He got me. Yeah, so, you know, the parts that I really enjoyed. I don't really have too much else beyond that. Like I was just bewildered for most of it, trying to figure out where in his career this is placed, because I did not look up any of the historical placements of it. I didn't realize it was a 1979 film. I didn't do any of that shit. I was just like, I'll just go in cold. I've seen the Draft House advertise this movie once or twice. Maybe there's something to it. And the moment that he looked at me and said, I was born a poor black boy, I was like, what the fuck is this movie going to be? So that's my bundle of thoughts. Dixon, what do you got for this?
Yeah, I think it's very telling, Ryan, that you did not give a plot synopsis when you introed this, because there isn't really a plot to this movie. It's just like a series of events that happen to a very stupid man, and basically like a large baby that has no concept of the world at all, and him just stumbling into weird events that occur around him and to him. And I John, I feel like your assessment of the first half or the second half of the movie is chiefly due to your high finally kicking in the second half of the movie, because I watched the whole thing stone cold sober and I was bored out of my fucking mind the entire time. I don't know. I feel like the humor in this is just such a low level that it's just like I didn't really think any of it was very funny. I think I agree with you, John, about Steve Martin's like later career. I think he has done some good stuff, but I don't know, like I've seen some of his stand-up that I liked, and like when I was a kid, I really liked The Three Amigos. I don't know if that holds up anymore. I mean, I don't like, dislike the guy, but I just didn't really get this movie. It feels very like classist and sort of like racist in parts, and it's like he grows up in his portrayal of a poor black family is like this sharecropper family that literally sings "Pick a Bale of Cotton." Yeah. It's like, okay, that's a choice. And then him accidentally getting rich, and then just being like, isn't this guy such a shit person because he thinks like old wine is bad and he wants new wine? And it's like, it just seems like very I don't know, just like making fun of poor people generally. And I don't know, like it's fine. I don't really have any moral issues with the film. Like it's from 1979. I understand like where it's coming from, but I just felt like it wasn't funny, and like the things that it was trying to do, I just didn't didn't really get. It has generally good reviews. Like it had a 61 Metascore, so like not bad. But I don't know. I didn't really get it. Just kind of went over or under my head, I guess. But yeah, Ryan, I'm curious to hear, because you said you watched it a lot as a kid. Like, are there, like, rewatching it now, are there moments that you were like, oh yeah, maybe this isn't as good as I thought it was, or is it like, does it just hit your funny bone in a way that it doesn't hit mine?
It's a good example. Some of the movies I've gone back and watched that are funny comedies, like in spite of whatever the fuck else is going on in them, where there are things that stand out to me. But if I had to tell you what the plot beats were, I couldn't possibly remember them. An example actually was a family. We watched 50 First Dates, which isn't like a zany comedy. It's in that weird, uncomfortable Adam Sandler zone where you can't figure out what exactly it is.
Yeah.
But if you'd have asked me, I've been like, oh yeah, he's somebody in Hawaii something, and then he bumps into her, and then they start having dates, and he finds out, she has amnesia. And I completely forgot the beginning of that movie is he just fucks a different tourist every night. Like that's the beginning plot. Because I'm like, okay, why would I remember that? Because it's actually not funny and doesn't it, it's supposed to serve the plot idea, I guess, but it's not good. Kind of the same thing here. I'm like, I remember being raised by a black family because that first line is just to completely shock and confuse you as an audience.
It does really do that. And I had heard that was like one of the only things that I knew from the movie, and so I like knew that was going to happen. So I feel like if I went into it completely cold, not knowing that would have landed a little bit better. But
yeah, and then I remember a couple key beats, but I kind of forgot, like, and this is where the movie definitely kind of loses its luster for a chunk. From the gas station to actually getting some money, the romance angle piece
that comes
kind of drags in some weird ways and doesn't quite make sense. And that's also about the point where you're like, okay, he's stupid, but how stupid can he be? Like so naive about the world around him, that also kind of dies off. And then once he gets some money and we get into some other zany shit, it kind of sort of comes back around for me. But I would have, like, if you'd been like, oh, what job does he have? I'm like, I wouldn't have remembered he was at the circus, because there's honestly not anything that funny there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of like that, where I'm like, the things that hold up for me, it is probably nostalgia glasses, where I'm like, getting shot at in the cans, like that cracks me up, and I still say that. Like the lines that come from this that I use is like that. Oh my god, he hates cans. Like if a can falls over or something, that's one of my go-tos.
Everybody stay away from the cans.
Stay away from the cans. He hates the cans. And then definitely at the end, I do think legitimately, and this is, you can tell where there's skits that he had probably from his own stand-up routines that he then sort of transferred into this movie. I think the ending where he's walking out saying he doesn't need anything, and then he just progressively picks up
that bit was
more
funny.
random
I laughed
shit.
at that. Yeah,
that is funny. That's the like absolutely hilarious, but it has no need of any setup either. Right? You can just watch that scene and laugh. Which is kind of how this movie is. It's like these bits, right, sort of strewn together with the plot. That was the other thing I was interested in, as we've talked before about a comedy like this needing something to hold it together, to not just actually be a series of bits. And this one vaguely has a story. I agree, it's Forrest Gump. He just kind of fucking fumbles through his life, not understanding what the hell's going on around him. I would say, yeah, in retrospect, as a kid in the mid to late 80s, probably, when I watched this, and then as an adult now, the opening scenes with his family are pretty outright sort of, what would you call that, racism, where it's kind of like what would you call it? It's not involuntary racism.
Involuntary racism.
I've tried to think of exactly how to phrase it, because it's sort of I guess the jerk racism. It knows it's playing with those stereotypes.
Sure, yeah.
In a way that, like, you mentioned Dave Chappelle. I'm like, his Chappelle show pushed a lot of buttons in of itself, and it wasn't just Chappelle making fun of fellow black people, he also, and not just white people, which anybody can laugh at, he did also hit some other races at times. And in his show and stuff he does. And that's where it always, with Chappelle, always got a little uncomfortable, right? And where he has actually brought in some controversy. It's funny to me that doesn't come up for Steve Martin, because you could just go back and point at the beginning of this movie and be like, we need to cancel Steve Martin.
Or was it like the poolside scene as well?
Yeah, definitely the poolside scene is where it goes off its hinges. Which is just like a setup gag from the beginning. Like why is he raised that way other than it's funny?
What explanation?
Right.
Because no other joke hinges solely on that. No other joke is required. Like the other, I don't know if you laughed whenever he sent that letter home and his was it his brother or something is listening to the parents read about him finding his special purpose. Which I was like, that's funny. That's just a fun entendre thing. And the dude just trying not to laugh super hard at it. I was like, this is great. But again, that doesn't have any merit with him having a black family or a white family or any of that. It really is just that poolside scene. Is the moment I saw that, I was like, oh, this is why all of this was set up. This and the opening line of "I was born a poor black boy" or something, which I don't know. The contrast there too of going back in time to show when you think that he might be a child, but he's full grown Steve Martin still, was also a little funny. I found that to be humorous in its own way, but it was just, the rest of it, I didn't see any purpose for it. It did feel like those sketches. You could have done, I'm thinking about all the different, because I guess one thing that this movie plays in is it's the jerk. It's got a character whose central figure is the fool. The fool as an archetype is used to actively critique things, to show how absurd certain concepts and constructs are. That's why Sacha Baron Cohen is constantly making fucking Borat films, because there's almost always somebody who's going to out themselves or some structure classism that's going to he can just point to it and somebody will just wrap themselves into a pretzel trying to explain why it's supposed to be this way.
You can keep getting Rudy Giuliani and Dick Cheney to do stupid shit over and over,
Exactly. When you script it though, you got to be sharper. And so it's one of those things where I think that's where it falls flat for you, Dixon, is it's a frivolous comedy that's supposed to just be have a fun romp, but it's got the character composition of a biting satire. What should be something that skewers any of its characters or any of its establishments. We go to that circus and it's there's not really a whole lot. You see just a bunch of the attractions and you really just get to learn that the jerk has sex for the first time. And that's the bit, but there's so much more that you could probably do with the circus. I have no idea what you want to bring into it, but again, probably not the best thing to criticize. I don't know, him getting a job at retail and his boss doing some shifty shit would be, funny commentary, but how do you do a goofy gag with it? Have him fall over a bunch of desks, knock over shelves, all this other shit that the jerk would probably do. Or have that dude that stalks him because why was that guy trying to murder him?
He just randomly picked him out of the phone book.
But then later he calls him a half-breed.
That's another gag that I love. The new book is here. The new phone book is here. Now I'm somebody. So because he put his name up to be in the phone book, he got randomly picked to be killed. And then, he shouts all kinds of random shit at him, which I guess is whatever crazy justification. He says later he wasn't in a good place. This is our Emmett Walsh.
I always love seeing Emmett Walsh in things.
He's great. He really cracks me up. Not to mention his run cycle in the later half of the movie where he shows up just killed me. I hadn't noticed that before, but just the way he's running at him just looks completely bizarre.
But
it is interesting. Yeah, there is class is used as gag setup, but never really necessarily talked about, because there is that. I think the closest thing we get, it's never biting satire.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, I think you're right. The closest thing we get is how stupid they are when they actually have the money, and kind of this idea of he did nothing. He did none of the work, I guess. He invented something that was honestly stupid. right? Yep. The whole idea is that invention is just
Do your nostalgia
stupid.
glasses have the OptiGrab on them? Right?
Yes, yeah, I think you're brought up. It's just honestly stupid, and that doesn't, what would be funny is if that popped up throughout the movie up into that, right? That it kind of kept coming back, that people had it, but it's forgotten about for a while and then comes back at the end. Or the second half of the movie.
Chekhov's OptiGrab, whatever.
Yeah, and then the money, it gets blasted away, and then by the way, we just have to end. This is one of those movies where it's like, all right, our movie's not funny anymore. We're out of time. We just end the movie. There's really no anything.
Have his family find him and hug him, and it turns out that they made a lot of money and they're okay. Was that
they actually did something? Yeah, they actually knew what to do with the money.
They just invested all the money that he sent them over the course of the movie.
Yeah, he sent them like $1 and like a nickel.
It does seem to mainly just try to be like, he's an idiot and we just watch him be an idiot, which Dumb and Dumber also kind of does. But what I think is interesting is that Dumb and Dumber to me is almost more situational irony. Well, there is right out situational irony, but generally the movie just plays with that situational irony. We know there's all this other stuff going on. There's, this money ransom plot. These guys are trying to murder them. And they have no fucking clue what's going on around them, and they just keep bumbling along. And that's what makes that funny. Here,
there's nothing like that in this
There's
movie.
Nothing like that. Yeah, he's just an idiot, and it's just idiot. Yeah.
You know what I would have liked to have seen? Sorry, I'm going to do a lot of what I would have liked to have seen.
But how could have made this? I was going to say, on the biting commentary, real quick, there was a scene that got cut where he's talking to another rich person in that guy's jet, and the seats are all kind of scrapped up, and he begs the jerk for some money so he can fix his seats in his private jet. And the jerk agrees, and he goes, now I can fly my friends to the Super Bowl in like a real man. And that's like a actual like satire of this. Like,
that would have been actually
that would have been funny. Yeah.
Why would they cut that? That would have been like one glimmering moment in this movie for people out there who want the biting satire. I would have, like you're talking about an impetus, like something to drive the jerk, much like Dumb and Dumber is, she left her briefcase, and this whole misunderstanding with these two idiots who decide to try to do the right thing. And the jerk doesn't really, he sets out to see the world because he kind of just is compelled to. And that's when his parents decide to tell him that he was adopted. And that does like nothing for him. Whereas I would think that would kick off a journey. He would try to seek out his biological parents, have no idea how to do it. Then he gets wrapped up into all this other stuff. It could be funny if the Emmett Walsh character was an assassin hired by his parents who were keeping tabs on him to make sure he never came back for an inheritance or some shit. And he's trying to kill him the whole time. And then he gets to his parents and they like make up, and you find out that whole thing kind of happened. It could lead to like a lot of goofy gags and repeat things of him being like, this guy just hates all of these things. Like he's got a list of cans and whatever else that Emmett Walsh shoots. Fucking who knows? Those could have been like good one-off, kind of build your comedy over time, but it really did feel like the plot took a break. Like they sent the plot writers on vacation for a while, which is just Carl Reiner and Steve Martin. But it's like, that just, he'll invent the OptiGrab and then he'll become rich and we'll have our own bits we set up with that. But for now, like, let's find something for him to do while time is passing to buy us time for him to make that money.
Yeah.
Just like, okay.
I also think it could have been funny if they had him like more passionately try to discover white culture. Like the idea of him like hearing white people music on the radio and be like, oh my God, I found my thing. And then leaving the house and going out and like trying to find himself. Like if he was like pursuing like white culture and just getting obsessed about like I don't know, diners or something, like just random shit for like, that he was just like really into, that was just like very white people things like that would be pretty funny. But yeah, the movie feels so aimless and like it's not really going anywhere. And I think like what you said about Dumb and Dumber, Ryan, I think makes a lot of sense. I think also like it's just the writing is so much better in that movie than it is in The Jerk, right? They're really just relying on, isn't this guy so stupid? Let's point at him and laugh. And like, Dumb and Dumber actually has clever jokes in it that are funny, aside from the fact that the characters are stupid. Like that plays in to the joke, but it's not just relying on, hey, these guys are dumb and they don't know what things are, like it is in The Jerk. I think another thing that I thought about is kind of comparing this to The Simpsons, because obviously that show is very much about Homer's stupidity and like making fun of him for doing dumb stuff. But I think again, like just the writing is so good in The Simpsons that the jokes are better. And also I think the like Dan Castellaneta's voice and the like zany animation, they can do a lot more with that kind of premise. And like I thought Steve Martin's dumb voice that he did was just kind of boring and stupid. And I just felt like there wasn't really enough for him to do. And the writing just felt like it just really sagged throughout the movie. I noticed that it was Steve Martin, it wasn't Carl Reiner, it was Carl someone else who wrote who got a story by credit and a screenplay, and then they had one other guy that had a screenplay credit. And I was like, when I saw that in the opening credits, I was like, oh, I bet they brought that guy in to like punch up the script at the end for like the final draft. And I watched the movie and I was like, they didn't punch anything up in this final draft. I don't know what happened.
Carl Gottlieb.
Yeah.
Yes, who worked on Jaws 2.
Oh, okay.
Jaws 3D and Caveman, like nothing good. I think with The Simpsons, Homer, when The Simpsons was good, the changeover from Bart to focusing on Homer was the lovable idiot.
Yep.
Where The Simpsons started to go off the deep end is when Homer just became an idiot, right? Where he like between episode to episode he couldn't read or something, right? And it was just played for a laugh. Versus being like someone you sort of know turned up a bit, right? Like like kind of like that, vaguely stupid guy that turned up just a little bit. Where the jerk is kind of just like completely ignorant to how anything works. Like, as he didn't go to school or anything. What's funny about that is I'm like, we don't really see any more with his family, but I'm like, do his brothers and sisters know absolutely nothing? Or is it he's so intrinsically stupid? Like, it isn't that he didn't go out in the world. He's just intrinsically an idiot and will never understand things unless they're...
I mean, the little that we see of the rest of his family, they don't seem to be anywhere near his level of low intellect.
Right. They get you talked about where his brother's sitting there, because the gag at the end of that letter is like, and I'm going to get a new job because she said she's going to give me a blowjob next week. Yeah. And then that's when the brother kind of like loses it. Also, I would say with Dumb and Dumber, it's mostly realistic, quote unquote, where this movie does take some broad, crazy angles, right? We do have a few things that I would say are more like the airplane, where it just is like, it's just there to be completely ridiculous. Obviously the highest one for that is his head spins, like literally spins.
Oh yeah.
So we have a gag like that is just a complete zany gag.
Yeah, and then like the other, what is it, when he's leaving home and he goes to hitchhike and they're like, I really miss him, his whole family. They're like, well, why don't we check on him? And they just like call out the window and he's still just standing out there. Like, he's been there all day. He hasn't eaten or anything. That's one of those like proto Zucker brother, gags or like airplane kind of style thing where it's like, there's the instant subversion of where it is. So yeah, I'd see like moments like that, surface. I think that's where I got all my giggles from. And also, the weed helped. So it was like nice.
When he first meets Bernadette Peters on the train in Griffith Park in LA, and he saves, what was that kid's relationship? She was babysitting? I don't even know. It's not important again. I wouldn't remember if you asked me. And she's like, anything I can reward you with? And he's like, could I have a kiss? And then he kisses the kid and not her. Like that kind of like somewhat zany, but then even more, it gets ramped up later when they're having their date and he leans in to kiss her and he just like licks her face.
Yeah.
Right? That it's just like, it's just ridiculous. Like he can't, it's not even realistic how stupid that is or what that even is. Right.
Yeah.
I also love how he describes wanting to be in the trumpet, but he doesn't want to be spit on or whatever.
He's so stupid. Yeah, he just says weird shit. And it's those are the moments that I'm like, all right, what the fuck?
The gag where he's talking while she's asleep about wanting to marry her, and he's like, it's been, only so many weeks that we've known each other, but it feels like this to me. And then he proceeds to describe how long each day and each week actually felt like.
Yeah, he's breaking the calculations down. He says it's been like 4 weeks, but it feels like it's been 9 weeks and 3 days instead of 4 weeks and 5 days or some shit. And
yeah, and he's like, on the first day it was like 2 days, and then the next day was like a week, and then it was back to like a regular day, and then the next 3 weeks was like 5 weeks, and then
that's that kind of
he's
thing.
Like, I have it all. He goes, I have it all written down. I can show you later.
Those are like the bits. Yeah. See, like those gags individually, recalling them, it's like, that's funny. But when you string it all together with like an aimless plot and the story and the way that it goes, you're like, there's something that feels oddly like, oh, you're like half in it. You know, you're half into this. If you really kind of work to, I don't want to say that like story structure has to be everything, but it really feels like there was more of like, oh, we got to get to this gag and we got to get to this. And I remember there's something that like the South Park writers have said, where if you are constantly finding yourself saying, and then you failed to tell a story that has good humor in it. And their belief is that you should say because, and follow the chain of events that happen and put your jokes in that. And this felt like a total and then movie, which good on them. It's probably an improv thing too, because they would just go for whatever the fuck they were going for in the moment. That whole, I didn't know how long he and Bernadette Peters would say goodbye to each other and ask each other if they were going to go on a date. I thought they would go for much longer than they did, because the rest of the movie already had that same kind of vibe of like, where the fuck else would this go? It has nowhere to be. We have no idea. Yeah. I didn't know if he'd keep dancing when everybody left his dance floor after that liability fucking class action lawsuit was announced, or what was gonna, I don't know. It had a lot unexpectedness about it. I guess that's the benefit when you structure your story as loosely as something like this, but it didn't feel like it used that.
Yeah, this is a movie. The entire premise of this movie is built from that one line.
Yep.
Like that was a line that Steve Martin thought was funny, and that was his pitch to figure out how to fuck to make a movie off of that one line.
Wait, which
and
line?
Then I was raised a poor young black boy.
Yeah.
Right. That was it. He had that and he was like, that'd be funny. Let's make a movie off of that. That's the start of the movie.
Wow. It's
and
like
somehow Carl
Reiner
Reiner was like, yeah, right. Monster House. Somehow Carl Reiner was like, all right, let's do it. And went from there. And then I totally think it's like he had these other funny lines and funny concepts, and it was just trying to string something to get to there. And I would say, unlike Family Guy, where it just goes there, like we just gag, and there's no point. It does try to get you there, which like South Park or The Simpsons, right, kind of tries to follow some beats to get you there. What South Park does well is start off normal-ish in its comedy, and then it gets to the part, comedy is about the unexpected and the like uncomfortableness that then gets broken by whatever the joke is.
Yeah.
And South Park does a great job of kind of leading you up to something where you're like, okay, here it comes. And it hits that part in the episode where it goes where you didn't even fucking possibly think it could have gone. Like that's how it does the zany, is you get to that point and it's like, I'm sorry, did you say crab people? Like it just goes off of a
crab people.
Right. And then you're along for the ride at that point. And I think this hits kind of like the individual bits kind of try to do that, where they get right up to that and then go a little bit over, where I think Airplane goes further, but then it is just bit to bit.
Yeah. I'm actually kind of curious. I'm trying to think of like other 70s comedies I've seen. Like maybe this is something where, Dixon, whenever I was first welcomed into your movie club way back when, I don't know if it's yours specifically or if it was
not anymore. It's not.
Yeah, there you go. We watched Young Frankenstein, and I went back and watched like the 1930s Frankenstein, because I was like, yeah, somebody who saw this movie was alive to see Young Frankenstein, surely. And they like, that would be where some comedy along with Mel Brooks sensibilities is interwoven and makes it like even funnier, because movie club we were with, nobody fucking liked that movie. But I was having a good time. And so I wonder if there's something here where like place yourself, before 79, look at sort of, because we've had like Animal House and some other stuff that's come that's like this outrageous comedy, and trying to be edgy and all of this shit. Is The Jerk like, because you said it was sort of the like proto Airplane, the progenitor for these things. Potentially, Ryan. And I'm curious if it is a turning point for comedy, if it's like a signifier in some way that culturally, that's why it's still kind of lauded and there's still not like the highest praise, but faintly high praise because it did something that shocked audiences and it grossed this much money because it kept people coming back for some reason. Was it just like, what was the zeitgeist at the time or any of that? Because now it seems like it's kind of faded a bit.
This being the tail end of the 70s is really where that stuff does open up. You mentioned Mel Brooks and
it's reminding me of High Anxiety.
Yeah, that's sort of but Blazing Saddles was before this. That was like smack dab in the middle of the 70s. And that is an outright zany, topical, satirical, over the top movie.
Yeah.
And Young Frankenstein was like that same year. This 79 would have been Life of Brian. So Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which is just doesn't even vaguely really try with its plot. My theory of like having a plot, I'm like, it tells you it has a plot and then it fails to give a shit about it anywhere along the way. Would have been earlier. And that's definitely like, it's British comedy, but it had a pretty good following in the United States even to that effect. I would say you go all the way back to talking Mel Brooks. The Producers was in the 60s. And in concept, The Producers definitely takes that, what I just said with South Park, because by the time you get through the like, it's just kind of funny in concept of what they're building, when you hit the actual play in The Producers, right, it's gone so much further than you thought, that it kind of comes back around, like it boomerangs back around in its ridiculousness, and to be something that's, scarily 20 years after the end of World War II, it's amazing that they, are making fun of that. So I think the doors to comedy were opened up in the 70s for sure, and they start to be kind of opened in the 60s. I think where this one falls, it isn't necessarily like, oh, there weren't funny comedy movies or there weren't great comedy movies before. I think this is what opened up that more of the comedy, like stupid, like it's just sort of a stupid comedy, I guess. Right? It's not necessarily like zany or something. Yeah.
Like, it's not gonna criticize or whatever. It's just gonna be dumb and goofy and have these gags, and there you go. Got your gags, good to go.
Off the top of my head, I would also say this is I think one of the first times I can think of where the comedy is kind of built around one specific actor versus being, we made a comedy movie and we got some funny people or we got a couple people together or whatever. This is coming from, SNL really, SNL really rocketed a bunch of people to be like breakout stars in of themselves. And then you start to see movies like this, and then you've got like Dan Aykroyd has his own movies, and right, you start to have these movies that are built around it. Because even Animal House, it's like, John Belushi is like technically not even the main character of that movie.
Not at all.
Like you think about it as a John Belushi movie, but really it's an ensemble cast of random shit, right? And this one is like it. If Steve Martin fails, there's nothing else to this movie. Bernadette Peters is hilarious, and this is a role that's like great for her. But I'm like, this movie is just you're either in it for Steve Martin or you're not, right? Like if it's not working for you, it's not working for you because it's all there is here.
Yeah. And I think like, you're mentioning other comedies from that era, and it's like, I'm criticizing this movie for like story and character, but like that's because there's just nothing here, right? Like I don't mind a plotless movie that doesn't have great characters. Like I like Airplane, I like stuff like that if it has good jokes, but like I think if you're going to make a movie like that, it's got to have pretty damn good jokes in it to hold it up when you have nothing else, right? And like for me, the jokes just didn't land very well, and when there's nothing else in the movie to keep me engaged, then like it's hard when you miss on the one thing that you're going for,
Yeah, and I think there are some high highs, but there are a lot of jokes that are just honestly like, okay. Like, one that comes to my head is when he is so stupid. He has absolutely no plan, and he just gets this job, I guess, because the guy tells him to start cleaning the bathroom. It was sort of unclear why he even went with that. But he's like, oh, you can stay here. And he takes him back into the bathroom, and he's just like, okay, I'll make this work. Like, whatever. it's not that funny. Like, you kind of get it where you're like, oh my God. And then he goes back into the next place, like, it's perfect and it's still shitty.
Mm.
Like, okay, it's funny, but it's not really that funny.
I feel like the only funny part was that there was a guy urinating in the bathroom while they were having that conversation.
Yes.
I think it would have been funny if that dude urinating also chimed in and tried to coach him on how he could do interior decorating in the bathroom. Oh yeah, you could put a plant right over here. I also like that. There were so many tells. That's the other thing is when you're going to do subversive humor, you got to hide your tells really well, I would say. Or if you're really going to show it, I don't know, you got to do it in a different way for me. Because when they walked into that bathroom, I saw that other door. I was like, oh, it's right through there. And then the jerk immediately launches into talking about what he's going to do with the bathroom. If I had never known that door was there and it just looked like a cramped bathroom with maybe like, there's a waiting bench for whoever's standing at the urinal over by this corner and it has like a tiny cot. It's like half the size of a human being. Like the jerk being like, I'll figure out how to sleep here and do this and that and whatever else. And then to be like, no, it's actually like through this stall, we knocked out a wall or something. I would have been like, oh, that's like an actual subversion that would have got me laughing a lot harder probably at what was going on. But
instead of showing the door in the actual
entire
shot,
time, you're watching the guy look at the jerk and then look at the door and then look at the jerk. And I was like, I'm looking at the jerk too. And I'm looking at the guy. Like, why the fuck am I here waiting for this to be the joke? I already know it's the joke. So it was like a bit of a pacing thing for me. I also wonder if like the joke pacing is off. Cause one thing I found is, I don't know, Ryan, if you found this too, but after watching a lot of Mystery Science Theater and then going to like a Master Pancake show or sitting with my friends and watching a movie, there's a lot of like dead air in jokes that I notice now, or like pacing between jokes, or watching things like Walk Hard versus, this obviously Walk Hard has a joke like fucking every 30 seconds to like a minute. It's kind of insane the amount they try to cram into that movie and still have like a serious story with characters that are supposed to have arcs and shit. And this one, I felt like there was a lot of building to like a very small joke. It reminded me of like a kiddie coaster where you're like, oh, we're going up. And then you get that little blip and your like stomach makes that nice little flutter. And that's about it. You're like, well, that was, I guess, nice. Sure.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it felt like for me.
It has been interesting going back and looking at that. I actually, there's a pacing to old movies just in general when you watch older movies. And I have this sense now of I'm like, God, they were figuring it out.
Yeah.
Like it really, and even it's been interesting to look at it like in my lifetime, and I guess, hindsight's 2020 or whatever. I guess maybe now things could be better, but it could. But I go back and I watch movies even, before turn of the century 2000s. And I'm like, wow, man, they didn't know exactly what to do on, with television or the timing or with movies. Like they still hadn't figured it out. And the further back you go, there is still that sense of like, they just weren't quite sure how it worked and they were making it up as they go in a way that I watched some like It Hot and it felt so slow and it took so long to get to a joke that was like a really over the top joke. And it spent a lot of time in a movie that's completely ridiculous, just actually being a movie, right?
Yeah.
And Christmas in July was actually surprisingly well paced.
Mm-hmm.
When we think back to that, actually was for the time I find it was surprisingly well like paced for what it was. But you go back to a lot of those older movies, and they're funny, but it's just like trying still to be a movie. And it isn't until you get to something like this where it's like, it's not really actually concerned with being a movie as much as being
it's
funny.
a vehicle for Steve Martin to try to make jokes. Yeah.
Yep. And I do think the difference between a Mel Brooks movie or Airplane is that this does feel more like stand-up, where there kind of is that, like, let me get them anticipating it, then I tell the joke, and then I need to be quiet for a minute and let the audience chill on it. And then either I can kind of heighten the joke a little bit more and kind of keep going with it, or we move on to something else. Versus Airplane and Blazing Saddles, there's kind of just such constant shit going on. Dumb and Dumber is this way too, I would think, where it doesn't really care if you get that current joke. You'll get it when you come back to it later, or we have another joke for you, or there are things where you're like, God, I didn't even realize that was a joke. Like, I missed that. Right? The Simpsons is good about that too, where there's sort of just a constant beat of things going on, and if you don't catch that joke in the moment, doesn't matter. It still works outside of all of that. But there's scenes here where it's like, if you don't get the joke of that scene, there's no point.
It's completely spent.
It's completely wasted.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the Zucker mentality was like, you should always have something going on in the foreground when you don't have something in the background, and always something in the background when you have something, when you don't have anything really in the foreground. It's like you switch off where you're being serious, and it feels like this is one of those where I really notice it. It's like, if the jerk had been running after being shot at the gas station, and in the distance you see Emmett Walsh like rolling down the hill because he fell or something, there's like a little bit of like slapsticky humor to actually get you through that part. But if it's just solely whatever the jerk does, whenever the jerk does it, all the other characters are there to drive him along, then it divides like half of the enjoyment time, it seems, with like, all right, this is either going to work or it's not. Here you go. Nothing to fall back on, no extra layers. I was like, all right. I don't know. I feel like
there's really no
now.
there's really no layers, right? Everything is on Front Street with this movie. Yeah, and there really isn't anything like other than Bernadette Peters kind of being a vaguely female jerk, I guess. She seems to understand how the world works. She just also is an idiot, I guess.
Yeah,
I might have been so blazed that I really liked their relationship for whatever reason. I felt that they had a decent enough chemistry, and I thought it was cute. I think at one point I started to warm up to the jerk in the sense of like, he has like a really, I don't want to say that he's like Joe Pera, but he had that kind of naivety for me when he talks about being in the phone book and being somebody. It was kind of sweet. And there'd be moments like that I really enjoyed. And I latched onto that innocence of the character. But then there's other shit where it's like, you're watching him be slowly corrupted by all the forces around him and not realizing it, but it felt so sloppily done. Never really caused him strife. Like I think the one time, doesn't he pisses off Bernadette Peters, but then she immediately comes to find him because she's concerned about him. And I really thought at some point he would just have a comeuppance. He would learn a lesson, but the comedy's not focused on that. The story doesn't care about that. It's not really an arc for him to have and be like, I now know how the world works. But yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, she leaves him initially, and I guess we actually don't really find out why, because the note gets wet.
Oh yeah,
and he has no clue.
About that whole scene where he's in the bathtub, and his dog shithead.
Yeah,
which
should call that dog shithead.
Somebody takes that seriously. It's funny because if you come into that movie after that point, you just think he's an asshole to the dog, but the dog's name is just legitimately shithead.
He's legitimately shithead.
It's a bit of like, okay, sure, fuck it.
Yeah,
that's kind of funny.
I guess the dog is also stupid, right? Where he like tries to sick him to attack and he attacks himself. Shit like that is somewhat funny.
I did kind of chuckle at the bit where he was like, "Oh, you got to leave town, shithead. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna have enough food for both of us. You got to go, like, find a family that'll love you." And he sprints away, and he's like, "No, never mind. Come back. He's like, "I'm not finished yet. Come back." He like keeps saying his speech, and then he runs out. He's like, "Okay, fine. You can come with me." And he's like dragging him on his leash on his journey to his next town.
Oh man, that is a big moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's hard to talk around this other than talking about like individual like comedic bits, I guess, that are in it. Which I think we probably covered the ones that are the highs are like actually funny. Other than I was gonna say the other sort of like a little over the top zany moment when the guy shows him the tape of the underground cat juggling.
Oh yeah, that whole scene.
Yeah, it was weird. Yeah,
I had a blast. That was when I lost my mind, Ryan. That was peak high, and my brain just melted because he was just like, "Oh my god, underground cat juggling! I've heard about this." And it's Steve Martin in like a wig or dyed hair, and he's just like clearly juggling dummies. But everybody's so fucking into it in that crowd. There's like a dude leaning on a handle of vodka or tequila, and I'm just like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah, and again, it's nowhere. There's no point. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't. Yeah, you would think. I agree. You would think that he gets scammed by the charities or something. No, it's just whatever. The only like vague comeuppance is he wastes all this money and then he ends up that somehow, you don't even buy it. Somehow his glasses invention makes everybody cross-eyed. I do love that it is like a class action suit led by Carl Reiner. And they actually just straight
as
up
himself.
acknowledge that it's Carl Reiner as Carl Reiner leading the class action suit. He loses it, and then you cut back to him writing checks for was it like $1.09?
Yeah.
He has to individually mail out the checks to the million people that bought the glasses. and I do think that's that like naivete. How do you say it?
Naivete.
That is vaguely endearing, right? He sends the postcard back to his boss. He sends these letters back to his family. Like, it's not heart of gold per se, but he just is such a simple man that you kind of are like, all right. But he just is incredibly stupid.
Yeah.
I guess we should mention more the bit where he's writing the checks and then his wife kicks him out of the house. And Ryan, you mentioned like that bit being pretty funny. It's like he's like, I don't need anything except this ashtray. That's all I need is this ashtray, but I don't need anything else. And then he like keeps going throughout the house and picking up more things. It's paddleball game.
And this ashtray. And he starts reciting it again and again. And he's trying
from
to
the
grab
top
something.
every time he grabs a new thing. Like the list just keeps getting longer, and you keep thinking it's the last thing, and the bit goes from like kind of funny to not funny to funny again as it gets longer.
And he's even like,
with this chair.
he's even like out of frame at the end of it, and you can just vaguely hear him listing off all the shit again. His pants are around his ankles.
This,
and then we cut to outside of him going down the street still carrying all this shit. I also like the bit where he runs out naked with the dog in front of him, and he picks up his neighbor's dog to cover his ass.
Yes. Yeah, that was good. That's a good bit. I thought that was, there's just those moments where it's like, oh yeah, that happened. That was really funny. It's so weird that it's overwhelmed by the rest of it. It makes sense, but just like now that you're saying it, more of it's coming back to me. And I'm like, I did have a good time watching parts of this movie. I laughed quite a bit of it. And then the rest of it, I was just like, I don't know what this is about.
So
what's the poolside scene again?
I was going to say, do what?
The poolside scene? We didn't even really talk
about it.
Maybe let's just not talk about that one.
All right, who wants to say it? I'm just gonna...
Oh, God. That's the one vague attempt at class conversation that this movie does sort of have when he's walking along with the guys, these other rich people telling him, whatever about diversifying and paying off.
They want to invest in an apartment complex, I think.
Yeah, investing in an apartment complex, all these, and he has no clue what they're talking about. He just wants to be part of it and is just like nodding his head along. And then one of them directly tells it that it's like, oh no, we're going to be using it to kick out poor black people. Not the word choice.
Yeah.
Which at that point, Steve Martin's like, "Hey, I'm a poor black person." Again, not the word choice.
Yeah.
The N-word, questionable word choice, used solely for the gag.
And then he breaks out into like,
and then he just goes into karate.
He starts fucking kicking these fucking apartment moguls' asses.
Yeah. Which I feel like the gag is just to have that. Again, the line, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're like, hey, I'm that. Yeah, that's it. That's what's supposed to be funny about that. The satire piece isn't really there, honestly. Like, it doesn't really try or care.
Yeah. I like, it also felt like that gag ends so, not even the gag of using the word, but just the end of that sequence is he fights off all these guys and then he's done. Which, in and of itself, we've never seen the jerk really fight, and we've never seen any kind of training he might have, or any kind of outrage strength he has, any of that stuff that indicate that fight would go the way that it went. I honestly would have loved it if that went to an indulgent place where he kicks all the dudes' asses, and then suddenly like women show up and it's a fantasy he's been having, and then it like cuts back and they're all just beating the shit out of him on the ground and like leave him or something. I don't know. It just way more cynical and harsh on the jerk.
Well, that scene ends with him kicking a guy in the balls, except it doesn't work because the guy's, and then it cuts away to like finding out that he has metal testicles.
Steel crotch
and then that's
McFadden or something?
Yep.
Yeah. Iron Balls McGinty.
Iron Balls McGinty.
And that's it.
Steel crotch McFadden.
I don't know.
It all works.
Yeah, I'm gonna write a fan fiction. Steel Crush McFadden. Oh man, yeah. Then he has to pay that class action check, right? That's what you were saying.
Yeah. It just cuts away from that, and then later he has to pay those. So again, it doesn't have comeuppance. It doesn't have. You would think that he would end up displacing his own family, right, or something, and then you're right. You have this constant sense of like, oh, it's going to come back around full circle, and the only like vaguely full circle it comes back to is going back to his family, and they now have money.
The money he's been sending them help them do whatever.
Help them to actually get money that he didn't because he wasted it, or he didn't even necessarily wasted it. Like he just lost it because of this class action lawsuit, right? He just sort of drifted in and out of poverty.
There you go. Easy come, easy go, as Jasper says in The Simpsons. When he gets his eyesight back and then loses it again.
I'm blind.
Comparing this to Tropic Thunder, since that was what we just previously talked about, right? Where we're mostly in it for the comedy bits and the ridiculousness. The pacing on Tropic Thunder, which again, like I vaguely remember the plot. Like it's interesting going back and getting those pieces of that movie, and I'm like, I don't remember this stuff. But it's funny. The things that I didn't remember in this, there was good reason not to remember it. The things in Tropic Thunder, there was very little. I went back and I was like, I don't remember this, and be like, oh, but it was funny. Like most in Tropic Thunder, I came back and was like, oh, I don't remember this, but this is hilarious. Yeah. And the pacing tends to kind of keep you going. There are more side characters are bullshit. Kind of everyone is bullshit. The satire is super biting. Like that movie kind of keeps its thing going for the most part.
Yeah.
And there's not particularly moments where you're like, all right, we got to get to the big finish. We got to work our way to it kind of knows how to keep going with it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting that this movie made a lot of money at the time and has kind of been forgotten. Tropic Thunder did well, but also has kind of fallen a little it's not cult movie. And this wouldn't be either because movie? It was a big.
No, it did well when it came out.
It did really, really well.
We have the same conversation. I had a fucking stroke.
Yeah. Well, like both of these made a lot of money and then kind of have faded away. And then people think that they found something great, not realizing that like it was good at the time. And then kind of people don't really care anymore. Not that it's some like lost golden treasure.
Yeah. I got to come up with a name for that. Got to coin a term. There's an opportunity afoot here. For comedies that aren't cult films, but people think they are.
Amnesiac cult films.
Amnesiac.
I don't know if that's a word, but
we'll find it, everybody. We'll find it. Don't worry. We're on the job. Well, was there anything else, Ryan? Any other trivia that we needed to know? I feel like I've seen The Jerk. I'm good for a little while. I might watch it again someday when I'm high enough.
Yeah, there's honestly, there's not much like around this movie or more to it, right? It is the kind of interesting that it is such a simple, straightforward production of a movie where it's just like, hey, we have a guy, he's a popular comedian right now. And this is like, I just mentioned the SNL stuff because that around this time and then kind of after is when you start to have those movies where it like just is a Chevy Chase movie.
Great Vacations
Blues Brother. That's two
fucking
people,
Blues
but it's
Brothers.
The same thing, right? Yeah, that was after this.
Oh, dude, great.
Yeah, that was after this, right? And then kind of any of that stuff, kind of Caddyshack, I guess, is also ensemble cast, but a lot of those things where it's
That's
like those movies. It's Rodney Dangerfield, but the main character is the kid. That's one of those movies that's funny where you don't even think about it. I'll tell you a good Rodney Dangerfield movie. That's the
Back to School.
Back to School. I fucking love that movie.
Fucking
that like this is the first one where it's like, hey, we're gonna build it around this guy that he's just funny, and then that's it. Like that is what the movie is, and so it just is that. Like it's just comedy bits built around this particular comedian. Yeah.
And you're done. Yeah.
And so that's it. There's nothing interesting around it because it literally was like he and Carl Reiner made jokes back and forth and then figured out which ones worked. There's obviously ad-libbing all over the place in this. I think they, even on filming, were just like, fucking whatever. Like, let's just do something and then see what sticks.
It really felt like they were just making this as they went along and didn't really have a solid script or a decent idea of what they were doing. It's just like, it felt like they were just like, oh yeah, then we'll just like figure out how to do some sort of bit around this and like, ad lib it as they go. And I don't know how much this was written out and how much it was worked through as they filmed it, but it felt like they didn't do their homework beforehand.
I really want to know if this is we had it. Like we had access to it kind of movie. You get like certain low budget movies where it's like, hey, we had it. Let's use it. We got a monster truck. Let's use it.
We have a T-Rex.
Yeah, we have a T-Rex. Let's make Tammy the T-Rex. Why the fuck not? This one, it's just like, hey, we had access to a gas station that's pretty run down. I knew a buddy who works there. Hey, the circus is in town. I don't think they'd mind us showing some free advertisement for them. Fuck it. Like all this other stuff just kind of is like, yeah, we got access to a dance floor, it's community hall, something like there weren't really intricate sets that needed to be built for this or any of, I don't know. It could have been pulled off.
Yeah, the only thing is the mansion, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And this is like a $7 million at the time movie that made 70, almost 80 million,
wow.
70 something million. Yeah.
Damn.
So a really big return on because it's honestly, even with the sets, like what's the one? There's a stunt, 2 stunts. I guess there's sort of like some stunting around the motorcycle, but it's really shitty. And then there's the stunt of pulling the church in half.
That
is the
was
only
a
like
great gag.
That's the only like expensive thing in this movie, honestly.
That was so dumb.
That mansion's been in a ton of movies. That's just one of those. It's just a mansion in Beverly Hills. I don't remember. Some Saudi prince owned it at some point. I think it's a William Randolph Hearst mansion originally.
No.
Yeah, and it's just been used a ton for stuff. And that was just, when he calls off the scene where he's like, he's writing the letter back and he's like, remember when I always wanted a disco room with people dancing in it all the time? Remember when I wanted a pool room with a camel statue behind it?
Yeah.
Like that's the
solid
entirety
red
of that
billiard room.
Yes, that script was just what's in the mansion, and they wrote it into
Right.
the script.
Yeah.
Like, that's what the set looked like when we got there.
It's exactly. All signs point to this.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't think that there's much that they had to even like bring into this movie. Though there is a custom designed car in it. That's one of those weird tangents. Yeah. So yeah, it seems like it's an easy movie to make. They made it up as they went. They made a surprising amount of money off of it at the time, but does it? Yeah, we can go around and give our final impressions. Does it hold up? Yeah, no. Does it have some funny scenes? This feels like a movie that's absolutely one of those. Don't watch it. Look for the like YouTube clips that some channel is getting away with.
Yep.
Being able to show because they're short enough or legally whatever. Just like those clips out of context are funny enough in themselves anyway. There's not any context that this movie gives you fucking anything. Is this Steve Martin's best movie? Nope, not even that. Like, I agree, Three Amigos, I would like to revisit it, but I actually think Dirty Rotten Scoundrels...
I kept thinking that this was that movie for some reason, and I've never seen
and you wished you were watching that.
But I was just like, I wonder what that's about.
Yeah, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels is funny. It has a plot. It has, some more, the story and stuff that goes with it, and it's more of this ridiculous sort of premise and setup for them to be kind of funny, but it really is more of just like, it's funny in its plot, right? Kind of what we're talking about with Dumb and Dumber to some extent, right? The concept of the plot is funny. Yeah. These 2 idiots that don't know the ransom money that they took. So yeah, I'm like, no, it's not even the best Steve Martin thing. Is it the first Steve Martin thing? Yeah. Is it worth that? No, because like has he left an indelible mark on the comedy world? Not since he burned any goodwill he'd ever had with horrible shit that he's made over the years recently. I guess he's got some TV show that I hear is all right, but I don't care.
Got a bluegrass band, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's an amazing banjo player. He has always been a really good banjo player.
I respect him more as a musician than a comedian. I will say that. I'm on record. I've got nothing against the guy, obviously. It's just I've seen enough of his comedies, and I say that with air quotes, and you can hear that, to just be like, I don't know if I want to do a Steve Martin movie. I don't know if I want to watch another one.
Yeah.
I did watch, he had a stand-up show with Martin Short that I went to with my family in Dallas a few years ago, and it was really good. Like, he's clearly can still write funny jokes and perform stand-up successfully, but it seems like that maybe just didn't translate to his film career as well as it could have.
Yeah,
I think what sucks in this case, because you mentioned Pink Panther, like that's a travesty. So it's cheaper by the dozen for that matter. And I also think of Leslie Nielsen as Mr. Magoo. I think that in all of those cases I just listed, they made more money on those movies than they ever made on anything that made them famous.
Hollywood, baby.
Right? Yeah.
Fucking raking the cash on a brand.
I can't imagine that even with this being the hit that it was, that Steve Martin really made that much money off of The Jerk, and he bought fucking houses off of probably cheaper by the dozen. Pink Panther,
it's like that Michael Caine quote. But still, I've never seen Jaws 4, but I've seen the house it built.
Right. And he, it's upfronts. Like that was one of those like guarantees, right? They came in and they're like, "Hey, dude, you want $100 million to do a cheaper by the dozen remake? Don't even have any other cast other than we're just trying to get you." And he's like, "All right, cool. I get $100 million. I don't fucking care if it sells or doesn't sell, right?
Yeah.
Like, doesn't matter."
There was a sequel to Pink Panther, and was there a sequel to Cheaper by the Dozen also?
They
just kept making that shit. Yeah.
Yeah, they just kept making them. Yeah, I don't think that Mr. Magoo got a sequel though. That's disappointing. Yeah, so I would say, it's a pass. Now when I quote stuff, you guys will know what I'm. No, not really.
Yeah.
even on my list of like these are movies that are critical to things that I say, this one's actually pretty passable. John, what's your take?
I feel like my being high made it so much better.
You gave this 4 stars on Letterboxd, John.
I kept those 4 stars because you know what? When I was high, it was 4 stars. I'll say it right there. But when I'm sober, I'm pretty sure it's far below 3 for me. Like I probably would not have laughed quite as hard at any of the things happening. I would not recommend this movie. However, I still will watch it in a few years to be like, what the fuck was this again? And I blame you, Ryan, and I will text you when I watch it again in several years. It'd be like, shit. It's not.
If Vinegar Syndrome had sent this to you and it was a completely unheard of movie, you would think it was brilliant.
There's no way that would be true. But I would have subjected several friends to it. Yes, you're correct in that.
The free floating plot that you have no idea where it's going is akin to The Astrologer. This movie just keeps going to new things. You're like, what? Why are we here? Why are we doing this now?
It's like Patterson, right? Just a week in
the
life.
How dare you?
I wanted to just come out swinging.
Wow. How dare you besmirch the good name of Adam Driver?
I'd watch Adam Driver in the Jerk remake. Ruin your career, Adam Driver. Dude. Make all the money you can.
Is it a comedy or is it like a fully serious?
Written by Noah Baumbach.
It's not a comedy. Yes. It's not. It's Jim Jarmusch.
I meant
the Jerk.
The Jerk remake is written by Noah Baumbach.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
All right, Dixon. When did you message?
It was about halfway through, and I just realized that it wasn't going anywhere. And I was like, what the fuck? This isn't leading to anything. And I realized that it was just never going to pay off anything or really develop into anything funny. And that's when I texted you, Ryan, what the fuck is this movie? Yeah, I did not like this at all. Would not recommend it to anybody. If you want to watch a comedy about stupid people, watch Dumb and Dumber, or watch The Simpsons, or some of these other things that we've talked about. Watch Airplane. There are other options to watch movies that make fun of stupid people that are just better written and have better jokes.
Yeah. Talking about being built around something, it is that it needs more than just like a plot per se. It kind of needs to have something that it's actually doing with it, right? Yeah, you mentioned like Young Frankenstein or Blazing Saddles, talking again about those movies or movie making stereotypes, right? That kind of plays with, or Dumb and Dumber with this like actual kind of core irony around it, and how just so far we can push how stupid these guys are and oblivious to everything.
Even like Anchorman,
kind of ridiculousness.
It's kind of in that vein too, where there's just a really stupid protagonist, but there is a story that you can follow that is fun to see what happens, and there's fun side characters who do funny shit. There's really good jokes. There's very much an aesthetic in that movie of like 70s newsrooms that is fun, and
and there's the like with Anchorman 2, right? Not this Anchorman 2, Anchorman 2. Ooh.
I like Anchorman 2, but
he loses his job, right? We kind of get this down and out moment where the character kind of which is interesting that the jerk does have that, but it's like the third to last scene. Well, it's like the third to last scene, and at that point, there's not really a feeling of any stakes or anything, because it just is kind of at the end of like, all right, whatever, and then we just immediately move off of that train. Where Anchorman, it is in the normal beat of a movie, at the point where you have that, the drop before we come back up, and rise up in the movie and solve the conflict.
Yeah. Well. Did we all just
talking about
this?
what?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, I think we all. Yeah, this. Wow. See, all right, I got us all together on an all down note.
Shit, I fought you guys to the death promise on that other one. It's.
I didn't even try to give my own on this one. I have wondered for a while. This is another side tangent. We could take the podcast on another episode where I want to see movies that I absolutely hate. I want to see what point it is that I'm done. If I go back and watch them now to all right, I'm going to give it a fair shake. I want to know what scene it is where I'm I can't possibly with this movie.
Or this is Ryan's version of Schlocktober, where he just watches a movie that he hates every day of the month and tells us the exact timestamp of when he couldn't take it anymore.
Where I'm I bailed.
It sounds like a government torture experiment.
That really does, yeah.
Oh, man.
It's Abu Ghraib shit.
Speed Racer.
Yeah. Speed Racer grew on me.
See, right?
I wasn't, the first time I watched it, I was checked out on the very first scene, or when the bomb comes in the little car. I think I think Phantom Menace, that's the one that always comes to my mind. Go back and be what's the point where Phantom Menace is
It's got to be as soon as Jar Jar
comes when he shows
screen,
up.
right?
When Jar Jar
I think it's when they go to Jar Jar's town. I think that's when it gets
Boss Nass
under the sea.
Yeah, they go under with him or what. I think that's when it is done. Yeah, also Spider-Man 2. I hate Spider-Man 2. I also hate X-Men 2, but I don't even remember why I hate them because I haven't watched them again. So that would be another to dig into it and be when is the point that I would be texting you guys fucking hate Spider-Man 2.
We need to open up a thread, find a way to publicly post that to a social media site somehow. Follow Ryan's progress. His
just timestamps on
sanity.
Movies. Yeah, if you want to see where it is, where I'm it takes up too much space in my mind to try to make this make sense, and I can't, and I'm done with it. All right, with the jerk, apparently it's halfway through. I do think it's probably about the part where he goes off to the circus and it's just fucking okay, what's going on.
Yeah.
That you probably kind of lose it on this movie. All right, so it's all for you. It's all around. I don't think we have anything else really here to say.
I'm done talking about this movie.
Yeah,
Dixon's been done for 20 minutes. I've seen him over here just fucking waiting.
It definitely sounds like we are done.
Really eyeing whiskey bottles that are empty around here.
So with that, I was your host Ryan King, and joining us,
John Garcia. Oh man, Dixon, he hates this movie. Get away from this movie.
He hates this movie. And our fellow refuter,
Michael Dixon. Thanks for putting up with Ryan's bullshit.
Hey there, movie buffs, TV toughs, and all listeners in between. John here from the Afterthoughts podcast. I just wanted to drop in at the end of this episode and say thanks for listening. If you've got afterthoughts of your own to share, hit us up. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Afterpod, or jump into a conversation on our Discord server. You can find info for this and more at theafterpod.transistor.fm. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.